the viewers got a glimpse of your last little bit of makeup studio work there, Matt.
Yeah, they didn't get the full treatment that I had in the bathroom before, so that's
Ah,
good.
yeah, they are the full shebang.
Yeah,
It's a weapon, that thing.
had to get in my trailer for a bit, but it's all good.
So today's a bit of a departure from our usual bland legal subjects. We've got Matt Clayton on from Meaningful Technologies. And what's the name of your other gig, Matt?
Imagineers.
Imagineers. And Matt and I are going to have a bit of a discussion about blockchain, NFTs, Top Shop, and basketball cards. Of all of those topics, I only know a vague amount about the latter, basketball cards, which I'm quite gleeful and excited about talking about, as those close to me will know, even though I really know fuck all about it, particularly in detail. But the other stuff is as much a learning curve for me as it is for everyone watching. So, Maddie, do you want to what is blockchain? Can you give us some sort of rundown for a real dumbed down version of what is blockchain for the layperson?
Yeah, sure. So blockchain is a technology. Blockchain has been around for quite a while. I think the first sort of papers that were starting to be written about blockchain date back to about 1997. And so the technology has been around for a while. So a blockchain is a time-stamped, append-only log. So what that means is that at a point in time, you can add information to a log. You cannot change the information that is already in the log. You can only append new information to it. All of those appendments eventually get put into a block. You make many blocks, the block go into a chain. So it's an append-only log. It's also an auditable database. So the logs, the blocks are stored in a database, and that database is secured with cryptography, hence the term cryptocurrency and things like that. All blockchains are stored with some form of with cryptography. If you don't know what cryptography is, it's basically solving problems, solving puzzles. So if anyone's ever seen a movie like The Imitation Game, which is quite a famous movie, he is basically doing cryptography in that movie to solve the big machine and hack the Nazi communications or whatever that movie was about. Then the third thing that is important to understand about a blockchain is that there is a consensus protocol. So the consensus protocol is how trust is established within that blockchain to essentially say that, yes, what is here should be here. A lot of people think that blockchain is a decentralized ledger. That is possible to achieve with a blockchain, but that is not specifically what a blockchain is. A blockchain is a time-stamped, append-only log with an auditable database secured via cryptography and some sort of consensus protocol. So that consensus protocol can be decentralized, meaning that no one owns it. That would be a permissionless blockchain, or you can have permissioned blockchains, which means that the nodes that are providing the computation to verify things are known. So you can have a blockchain that's not decentralized. Blockchains, of course, have come into prominence thanks to things like Bitcoin, which is a cryptocurrency. So essentially, that is a currency that is built upon a blockchain. And we can dive into that more if you like. But all a blockchain is a time-stamped append-only log with an auditable database and some sort of consensus protocol. So if we look at the question through what does that enable, it basically enables us to, if we so choose, decentralize all trade and transactions to a database that is publicly accessible and immutable and append only. So what that means is that once something is stored in that database, the entirety of the public can access that transaction, and that transaction can never be touched or changed. All that can be done is more information can be added in the form of new transactions, if you like, or new things within the log. So that's what a blockchain is. It's actually quite a simple thing.
You
Now, of
explained
course,
to the other,
execution is complex.
you explained to me the other day by way, you gave me a kind of, as part of your explanation of what it was, you touched on what it isn't and how it would, if it managed to work in any, if it managed to gain traction in any, how do I say, if it managed to gain traction in any kind of widened or really popular way, you said it would destabilize and potentially eventually eradicate the need for institutions such as banks. That was a really interesting, that helped me understand a lot more of what it is. Could you run the viewers through that again?
Sure. So there's maximalist views of what blockchain can be in the future, and there's minimalist views. So a maximalist view would be that blockchain essentially is heralding the entire change, eliminating the need for our current financial system, and basically changing the way that the entirety of the world's trades, economies, and everything are set up. Plus many other things. So a maximalist view, and certain projects have this kind of view, is that trade, finance should not be controlled by any one entity. It should be decentralized. And so most, or a lot of blockchain projects are open source projects with quite a strong philosophy behind them about how the world should look. So a maximalist view basically is, and more academic people will give you a more academic answer to this, but the maximalist view is that blockchain is the Web 3.0 going to change everything, completely change the entire way that our economies work, that trade works, and the way that it's managed, such that it takes power away from the current financial institutions, such as banks, and decentralizes it all. Which obviously means that all the financial system is really a way of collecting economic rents. The financial institutions sit between all of our trade. So if I want to pay you money for something, there's a bunch of financial institutions who sit between that. When I pay you money, it goes to all those institutions, they clip the ticket, then the money eventually gets to you. So the maximalist view says that that entire middleman of the financial institute is gone, and that the blockchain replaces it. Now, there would still be fees and things like that, but they would be much lower, and the entirety of that process and that transaction would be public in a ledger that anyone can see for all time.
How does Bitcoin fit within that explanation?
I'll get to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency soon, but I'll get to, so a minimalist view would be that blockchain is just another set of technologies which has some potential to improve the way that things are secured and whatever, but basically that it's not going to completely change the way we do everything, right? The minimalist view is that it's just another set of technologies. There is some practical application, but that's still far away, and it's certainly not going to disrupt the entirety of the financial institutions that are in place now or anything like that. If anything, it's going to be something that the banks and things like that adopt and use to improve their own processes, systems, competitiveness, productivity, etc. But it's certainly not heralding in banks are going to be a thing of the past. That would be sort of more towards the minimalist side. So where cryptocurrencies come into play is, to understand cryptocurrencies, you have to understand money. So the role of money in society and an economy is it's a medium of exchange, it's a store of value, and it's a unit of account. So there are many different types of money, right? But let's just focus on the money that we all know, fiat currency. So let's just talk about money in the sense of fiat currency. Fiat currency is a medium of exchange, it's a store of value, and it's a unit of account. So what Bitcoin is a new form of money, if you like. Now, I would say it's not really that new because the vast majority of the money we use already in society is electronic. Bitcoin started, and I wanted to talk to this specifically because it's very important to understand. Bitcoin started from a white paper that was written under the name Satoshi Nakamoto. So Satoshi Nakamoto, who is an alias for someone, there's much speculation as to who Satoshi Nakamoto actually is, but the paper was authored by this pseudonym or this alias of Satoshi Nakamoto.
Do you think Bitcoin. it could be Pants Matt?
I think that it's the probability is extremely high. Put it that way. I think that's why he's such a mysterious figure, is he's constantly trying to not only not let anyone know he's Satoshi Nakamoto because he presumably holds so much Bitcoin, but because there'd be massive ramifications to people finding out that he is in fact Satoshi.
What if he
Nakamoto
is Satoshi
right
and doesn't even know it?
He's a very rich man. He can probably get some new pants. But anyway, Satoshi Nakamoto wrote the paper on Bitcoin, which started it, which is called Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. So I'll read you a little bit of the abstract from it because we may as well go right to the source. So the abstract, part of it is a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. So there is no better explanation of what cryptocurrency is than that. A peer-to-peer electronic form of money which you and I can exchange without a middleman financial institution. So that's what Bitcoin is. Now, I think most people are excited about Bitcoin from it as a store of value rather than specifically as a medium of exchange or a currency. It's far too volatile, of course. A good example being is a very famous email that was sent on May 22nd, 2010, called Pizza for Bitcoins, ? So someone wanted to exchange 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoins. And it's quite famous. He was trying to get anyone to exchange 2 Bitcoins for 2 pizzas. And he basically said that, okay, at the time, 2 Bitcoins are worth about $41. So it's about $20.50 per pizza. And the pizzas will only be like $30. So you're making a little profit here. It's a good deal. Obviously, 10,000 Bitcoins right now roughly is worth about $500 million. So as a medium of exchange in terms of a currency that's going to replace fiat, I don't think that's very viable or feasible at this point in time because it's too volatile. However, as a store of money, a store of value, sorry, a lot of people consider Bitcoin to be digital gold.
I don't really know it. In fact, I know almost nothing about it. What's the scarcity or lack thereof position with Bitcoin? How is it created, and then how does it become scarce or not scarce?
So different implementations of cryptocurrency or coins or tokens have different means of dealing with this. Bitcoin has a total possible supply of about 61 million, I think the number is, or 61 billion. But let's just say it's 61 million. Someone will know what that number is. I think it's 61 million. So at any one time with Bitcoin, you have a circulating supply. So that's the supply that's currently in circulation, that's currently accounted for. You have a total supply, which is the total supply that's been mined, but is not necessarily in circulation. So for example, you can have some held in escrow or reserve. They're not on the market, but they have been mined. Then you have your total possible supply. So in the case of Bitcoin, I can tell you the exact numbers right now if you like. So Bitcoin has scarcity. There is a finite number of Bitcoin that can ever exist. The way that new Bitcoin come into circulation is through what's called Bitcoin mining. So the way in which the consensus protocols work is basically that there's a bunch of computers running in the world, running the blockchain. For a new block to be written to the chain, what has to happen is that you have to guess a random number, basically, and whoever guesses that random number gets the opportunity to write that block to the chain. So when you hear of things like Bitcoin mining, what you are doing is you are participating in that process of trying to guess the random number so that you can write the next block to the chain. If you do so, if you guess that number, you are rewarded Bitcoin for being the computing node which has successfully guessed the problem. So that's how new Bitcoin come into circulation, is as a block is written, the successful writer of that block gets awarded an amount of Bitcoin, and there's different rules for how this works, etc., for successfully guessing that problem, which is why Bitcoin mining comes in and out of fashion, because the economics of mining Bitcoin right now, with Bitcoin being valued at roughly 50,000 USD, is very good. Whereas when the value drops, it's not as cost effective to mine Bitcoin. There's various different problems with that in terms of Bitcoin mining is very expensive. It consumes a lot of power. Bitcoin, in terms of its technology on the blockchain, is actually quite old and inefficient, which is why things like Ethereum is about to move to Ethereum 2.0, which is it's changing the way in which the consensus works. I won't bother going into it too much, but from proof of work to proof of stake, which is a much more energy and resource efficient way of writing new blocks. In the case of Bitcoin, it's called mining Bitcoin, or mining blocks, if you like, whereas if you're talking Ethereum in a proof of stake model, it's called minting coin. So it's just a more efficient way of doing it. But does that answer your question? So there's a scarcity. That scarcity is achieved over time through the mining process. The more computing power that's in a network, the more complicated the problems get, so the harder it is to mine. But there is a finite number. Whereas in the cases of certain blockchains, there is no finite number, because that's how it's designed. But in the case of Bitcoin, there is a finite number, and I was going to tell you what that was, which I'll tell you right now. So at the time of this podcast, right now, and there's interesting things going on in the market right now, by the way, but Bitcoin is at 52,269 USD. The market cap is 974.75 billion. So the market cap that I just read you is the price multiplied by the circulating supply. So it's the total number invested in the circulating supply currently. The circulating supply of Bitcoin is 8.649 million, and the maximum supply is 21 million. So we're actually quite close to the maximum supply of Bitcoin already, but it's going to take many years before we get there, I believe, at the current mining rates.
What's an NFT?
Okay, so NFT stands for a non-fungible token. Fungible is a fun word. Basically, fungible means that there is nothing that you can exchange it for. So let's say, for example, you buy a ticket to a concert and you lose your ticket. That ticket can be exchanged for another ticket that's completely identical. In the case of a non-fungible token, there is nothing which can be exchanged for it. So what that means is that the NFT is completely unique, and all an NFT is a non-fungible token. Is a token you can assign to something that says this is the one of that thing.
Cool.
I'll read you the definition of fungible because it's quite a cool word. So the adjective of goods contracted for without an individual specimen being specified, replaceable by another identical item, mutually interchangeable. So the definition of fungible is replaceable by another identical item, mutually interchangeable. So non-functional means it cannot be replaced by another identical item, and it's not mutually interchangeable. So what's going on in the art world, for example, is that digital art with NFTs is going bonkers. So that's where you get into stuff like NBA Top Shot and various other schemes and things that are going on.
What is NBA Top Shot?
NBA Top Shot is essentially aiming to, this is my words, not theirs. NBA Top Shot is essentially aiming to digitize the collectibles space in the NBA. So for example, the collectibles space in the NBA revolves around basketball cards primarily. So you would historically buy packs of these basketball cards. They have various different rarities, from, you know, common to uncommon to rare, as most collectibles do. And you collect them, they're cards. So Top Shot is aiming to take that same thing, but digitize the collectibles approach online for basketball, such that you can own clips of things that occur in the NBA. So you buy packs, you open packs, you get clips of, you know, Luka Doncic making a shot or whatever, and you own that clip. You are the sole owner of that clip with an NFT. That's what NBA Top Shot is.
There's a startup, is it an American startup called Dibs.io. It's an app that's available in the US. I think I've showed you, Matt, just for the viewers. Can't get it here. Most of our viewers are New Zealanders or Australians. But what it is, I understand, is an NFT backed, sorry, it's a physical basketball card asset backed trading platform, and it's back, and that underpins the NFT, just the same way that mortgage over land underpins certain securities in the US trading market, so on Wall Street. So I'll explain how that works. So if you have a LeBron James rookie card, like this one here, there's, I think, 1,800 of these worldwide, and a PSA 10. It's one of his most sort of revered rookie cards. Gets a bit of shit for the old, what they call it, they have a word for it, something suit, but it's his mum like bought him for his 18th birthday and it doesn't fit properly. So what happens is they have these cards and they're stored in a vault, and then they assign NFTs to shares in the particular cards. So it can be lucrative for the people that own these rare cards, and it's also attractive to investors who maybe don't have enough money to, or are not stupid enough to want to spend the thousands or tens of thousands of dollars on rookie cards like that. So that's quite an interesting combination. I use it by way of illustration to sort of pull together the disparate kind of themes that we're talking about today with new tech and, you know, an age-old industry like collectibles. What do you think the impact of that could be, using something like an NFT to denote ownership and underlying base collectible? You think it could take off, or is it a pipe dream, or is it?
There's lots of different perspectives. I think that I think very clearly that it's smart and practical. It's very practical for artists because they can control the supply of their art. They can verify that it's real, that it's theirs. There's lots of NFTs are not just NFTs are programmable. So what that means is that you can program things into them. So for example, NFTs, what you can do with them is, let's say that I buy something, let's say you're an artist and I buy an artwork from you for $1,000 today. And then let's say that you as the artist go and build your brand and reputation, you have a few art shows, you get a lot of, you know, you build your following through social media, etc. Let's say in a year, let's say something more realistic. So in 5 years' time, you've driven up your own perceived value and the value of your artworks, etc., such that that painting that you bought, that I bought from you for $1,000, is now worth $10,000.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have the NFT, which denotes that you own the real piece of art. It's solely yours. You get to do with it what you will. Let's say that you sell that to someone for $10,000. I, as the artist, can earn 10% of that transaction because it's coded in the NFT.
Yeah.
Now, let's say that the person that I sell it to sells it. The artist can continue to generate a clip of the ticket of their art, depending on its value, as it gets exchanged. So it's a way of changing the way we trade and exchange things as well, potentially. At its most basic level, it's just a means of ownership, of verifying ownership, things like that. But there's lots more that you can do with this stuff, which I think is very, very, very promising. I think when you're talking about things like art, where you're not necessarily displacing profit from existing companies and institutions and people, I think that's where blockchain applications will find their easiest path. But when you're talking about blockchain disrupting and severely impacting existing commercial institutions and things like that, or commercial and governmental or whatever, we have to be much smarter about the way that we bring this technology into society and bring commerce, etc., along. But yeah, so coming back to your question, NFTs are programmable as well. So there's interesting stuff that you can do with it, which obviously has lots of interesting implications for artists and such like.
What do you mean by smarter, how we bring something like blockchain into the mainstream? What do you mean by that?
So coming back to what we talked before about the sort of maximalist and minimalist view on blockchain, yep. I think we would be foolish to try and drive blockchain adoption with a maximalist approach, meaning like this mentality of sort of fuck the system, let's overthrow it. There is too much, you know, it's going to be far too difficult. Just so you know, my view on blockchain is, I think you have to look at all technologies from the perspective of what does it enable. The purpose of technology is to enable outcomes, usually to make things more productive, to make things more scalable, stuff like that. But the point is to enable some sort of outcome that we experience in our lives. So I think blockchain represents our capability to solve a lot of the inequalities that are very prevalent in society, long term. So things like the growing income gap and things like that. I think blockchain is a technology that can enable that change. Now, that change could occur without blockchain, but I think blockchain actually is our best chance to make certain things happen. Now, I'm very, very maximalist on my view. I'd say probably center maximalist on my view of blockchain long term, but I would preface that by saying I have more of a minimalist view of blockchain in the short to medium term. So what I mean by that is that I think that we need to bring commerce and institutions and governments along rather than go to the approach of let's just completely flip all of this on its head, because I don't think that's going to work. So
I can't remember the academic that said it, but I went and watched him speak actually in the Rialto movie theatre. I think Megan Jaffe got him into New Zealand. It's disappointing I can't remember his name. I'm normally pretty good with this stuff, but he talked about how real change has to come from within institutions, and he gave the example of why protests don't work. And I can't remember the exact protest he was talking about, but he was using it as a metaphor for all protests as a concept, saying you had to bring change within the less repelled or obstinate people within the power, within the construct, I think was the word he used. You have to start infiltrating the construct from outside in so that there's change coming within the halls of power. And I think that's really what you're saying here, is that if it comes if it is presented as this full-on attack by persons who have historically associated themselves as being putatively powerless or anarchists, then it's not going to happen. You need to give the institutions buy-in. So what we're really saying is it's not really probably likely to be successful as a tool to exact any kind of hierarchical overthrow. It's more going to come in a politically neutral way to facilitate what was already happening anyway. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that there's a lot of other factors at play. I think
there must be, yeah.
I'm speaking in a kind of broad sense, but my intuition tells me that the change that we will be able to make is very generational. So I think my generation, for example, is much more focused on things like equality and addressing things like wealth gap and things. We're much more, I think it's built into our psyche that there's something wrong with the system and that things need to change. And I think that the more you go down the line in terms of age, I think the more that exists psychologically. So I think by the time that the majority of the world's positions are held by people in my generation, I think that our psychology around things is a lot different in terms of what's right and wrong. Again, this is why it's a very deep philosophical subject, but I think that a lot of the people that hold those positions now in institutions have a very different view of the world than younger generations. So I think that the changes might start to occur quite rapidly, but within the context of generations moving into power and various other things. Could be completely wrong on that, but there's so many things that need to be discussed with this, but my views in general are that I think blockchain is the best opportunity we have to actually drive some of the change that many of us want, such as addressing economic inequality and various other things. And I would encourage people to look at or listen to the thought leaders in these spaces. So, for example, I really like listening to the founder of Cardano, Charles Hoskinson, who is one of the co-founders of Ethereum. His views on blockchain and its adoption and its potential and everything like that, I think, now I haven't listened to all people in this domain, but from what I've listened to him, he's not only very inspiring and has a clear vision for the future, he's also very smart and savvy when it comes to the commercial aspects of adoption of this type of technology. And he's got a very balanced message, I think, in terms of not only does he have a big vision for the future, he's building the technology to enable it. He wants a lot of this change to happen, but he's also pretty clear that if you do it in a smart, sensible, commercial way, it's going to be much better for everyone. And I think that's the case. So long term, I'm very maximalist on blockchain's potential. Short to medium term, and by long term, I mean in my lifetime. I don't mean in the next 10 years. I mean in 20, 30, 40 years. In the short term, 5 years, medium term, 10, 15, 20, I'm more, I would say, sentimentalist on blockchain. I think we will start to see a lot more, there'll be imbalances to it as well. Like I think NFTs as a space will take off quite quickly. I think smart contracts as a space will take off quite quickly. But the whole idea of our sort of entire world economy running on blockchains and being very decentralized and shifting the power away from financial institutions and central banks, etc., I think that if it occurs is quite far away.
Okay. What are our last topic for today? What are your thoughts on sports cards as a viable alternative investment strategy?
Love them for sure. Because what better investment than to have something that you can look at? Absolutely. Now, are they a safe, good investment or whatever? We're not here to give financial advice. Personally, I like them. I think that they're great. One thing that I wasn't kind of aware of or hadn't made the link to, which I have now, is the one reason I think NFTs and collectibles are so popular and will continue to grow in popularity is their tax implications. So there is a lot of, I read a great quote the other day somewhere. I wish I could remember the source, but I can't. The high-end art community is not filled with artists, it's filled with accountants. And the reason is because art offers the potential to not be taxed and to do very clever things with tax. Such as, let's say that you buy an NFT worth $10 million and you decide to be very kind and donate that $10 million NFT to, a charity or something. You've just given yourself a way to write off $10 million in tax. Now, for the uber wealthy, that's very valuable. Because blockchain and things like NFT are peer-to-peer and there's no middlemen, it offers a way to move money around a lot quicker. Now, whether you are doing that for tax reasons, whether you're doing that for collectible reasons or whatever, who knows? But speaking specifically to collectibles, if you look at what money is, unit of account, store of value, medium of exchange, collectibles are certainly a store of value if they have scarcity. And I think that's why people like them. A lot of people are looking for store of value opportunities. And I think that's why collectibles are so popular right now, is that people are looking for places to store their money. And it just so happens that these things are growing exponentially in terms of what people are valuing them at, because more people are bringing their money into the market. Now, those LeBron James cards that you've got, LeBron James is, from a scarce supply of those things, which they are, in high quality, like PSA 10 or whatever, I think you're sitting on a gold mine long term. It's just whether you have the tolerance to sit with it for long and go through these big market swings and cycles. But I think the cool thing about collectibles is you get something that you can experience. It's not just a number on a screen. It's something that you can have and hold and touch or display or whatever you want to do. I think they're very cool. But you're the collectible man. You're the one into it. Why did you get into it? What attracted you to the space?
Well, I love doing it as a kid.
I know it's
always
not your knowledge about basketball.
I was into it as a kid, and I was always the kid who never got the big pulls. So now that I've, done okay for myself, I like being able to, use my money to get the card that I never managed to get as a kid, because I was always the unlucky goober kid who at the back of the shop who always got the like Jamal Mashburn rookie card rather than the Michael Jordan. I was never quite in that top echelon of.
Part of it is the nostalgia and things like that.
Yeah, so like that's one of Gary Vaynerchuk's biggest things, as he said, the 10 to 12-year-olds watching Jordan grow up, and now the 35 to 45-year-olds with some disposable income. And they combine that with, the fact that with eBay, so just a massive set of eyes. Instagram, I've got an Instagram account, even though I hate Instagram from a personal perspective. I've got a very sort of under the radar Instagram account, which is just used to show off my sports cards and basically more to look at all the other sports cards and trading and buying opportunities. And yeah, it's just something you can, as you said, it's linking in the store of value. So what I'm going to do with any disposable income that I don't want to just throw away, in something which you can kind of follow. That's kind of cool. And like you said with LeBron, if there's like a really high grade of a card that was produced in 2003, they're not making any more of them, and he's a global icon who may go on to do all sorts of things off the court as well as his storied career on the court. It's just, it looks, I'm a punter by heart. Had issues with maybe punting a little bit too much in my life, but it feels like it's just enough to satisfy that punting urge without actually just be pure gambling. Plus it's fun to watch games and like root for your guys in there, knowing that if the final buzzer goes and they don't make that three, it's actually not the biggest deal in the world because you've invested in the macro of that player. So it's quite a cool thing as well. The other reason I like it is it's just something. Actually, I've met some really cool people along the way, like really cool people in the hobby, and it's something else to do, which, given a lot of the options out there for how we use our time, it's a really fairly non-destructive, as long as you stay away from opening too many packs or doing what they call these razzes online, which are basically pure gambling. A razz is when they take a spot from 1 to 100 and you put in $100 hoping to get a $10,000 card, or what they call pack breaks, which is huge on YouTube. And another reason it's driven the prices up enormously is you put in $500 or $100 depending on the type of cards you're buying, and the pack breaker opens up the cards. But the thing is, the pack breaker is getting say $3,000 for a box of cards from all the punters, and if your guy comes in, you could hit the lottery. But again, it's just gambling. So if you can sort of stay away from those aspects of the hobby, and you can buy high-end, low-supply Hall of Fame, at worst Hall of Fame, but ideally LeBron, Michael Jordan, players like that, it is a store of value. It is quite fun and exciting, and it's quite a cool hobby in terms of connecting with other human beings over what is a relatively prosaic yet somewhat interesting topic. So I've found it quite a cool thing to invest in. Plus, I was talking to one of my friends over in the States who you've met, Jason, who's a very opinionated but quite an intelligent guy. And I was asking him what he thinks about it. And he said, well, look, I thought he'd be the first person to poo-hoo something like this. But he was quite bullish about it. He said, look, to be honest, you actually get something. It might be just a, couple of square inch by square inch piece of paper, but it's real, it's tangible, and humans can't fuck with it. I mean, sure, you can manipulate through grading, etc., but compared to some of the, the stuff that goes on Wall Street with the manipulation, all the stuff we see coming out, and those quite comical, that whole GameStop thing, there is a sense that it can't be manipulated to the extent that some of these more complicated asset classes can. So I think in the US, they've gone for it partly as a reaction to, obviously, they were not pro mortgages after 2008, after all the mortgage-backed securities fueled, or that's at least the way it was reported, the GFC. So they went away from that. They don't have the 87 crash that we had, so they're not as bearish on stocks. There's no, I apologize for sounding like some, try-hard financial advisor, because I'm certainly a try-hard, but I'm no financial advisor. Talking about all the different places to put your eggs, so to speak, and it's quixotic, unusual alternative investment, but it seems to have gained traction for all of those reasons. It is actually quite safe and quite interesting and safe. And it's a good way to use your time. The last thing I'd say about that whole spiel is, like with anything, a lot of people got into the hobby and recently and bought a whole lot of packs and were hunting for rookie cards like the one I've got here, Zion Williamson. And I see a friend of mine, Wayne Crone, has just popped up in the comments section. He said, Ja Morant is not cool. I lost all my money on basketball cards. No one needs to cry for this guy. He's not a pauper. He is prone to, as many of us are, a get-rich-quick scheme, and it's not the only time him and I have invested in something and ended up with our trousers around our ankles. But I tell you what, it's not for the faint-hearted investing in new players, because they've really got to be top 3 or top 5 all time. And how many rookies are there in the draft every year, Matt? 30-something for each round?
30 in the first round and 30 in the second round, yeah.
Yeah, so that's, the odds aren't good. If you can get in and get a 1 of 1 or a 1 of 10 or 1 of 50 of someone like, dare I say, Zion Williamson, you could hit the lottery, but it's no sure bet, as my friend Wayne Crone has found out.
It sounds like Wayne simply can't handle the market dynamics. I think longer term, Ja Morant is probably a good hold. I just think he's all cards. Modern cards
I'll tell you a little story about that, though. The problem is that Wayne, under my very specific tutelage, went out to see a friend of an acquaintance of ours called Frank. Now, Frank is a small Chinese man that owns a store called Bay Dragon Sports Card Collectibles out in Botany. Wayne went out the day I told him that Frank had new product in, but Frank had all the new stuff, all the good stuff out the back. And when Wayne came in, he gave him all his money and got a whole lot of what's called mosaic, which is high volume, but basically trash. So Wayne gets home and opens up all his cards and finds all these Morants. Unfortunately, the most expensive one he got was worth about, I think, $12 US. So it was a tale in, a lack of attention to detail leads to is folly. And unfortunately, our friend Wayne Crone is no longer in the hobby, although he has some reasonably overpriced Luka Doncic rookie cards, which he spent around $15,000 on when he shot the buzzer beater, which have now lost half their value since the buzzer beater in the playoffs last year. So it's been a fraught experiment.
To hold those. Luka's a top 5 player all time, potentially top 10.
I've actually tried to trade those for him, win some shares in another startup that you're familiar with, Matt, but he wouldn't trade them for me.
I heard you're the world's biggest holder of Bol Bol cards as well, Shane. Do you want to speak to Bol Bol's long-term potential?
Well, you told me that this guy was going to be good. So I've got about 45 of these cards I bought at $40 US a piece. And the current price, I think, is around $8 US. I think he's played about 6 minutes. And I tried to Google him the other day to see how he's getting on. The first thing that pre-populated in the Google search was, does Bol Bol actually play?
I've got faith in Bol Bol. So have you invested or dabbled or thought about investing in any cryptocurrency at all?
I think that's part of the reason why I do enjoy the sports card thing, is that it's simple enough that I understand it's prone to manipulation. I understand that it could be another fly-by-nighter craze like the 90s. In fact, I'm sure it is. To what extent, I'm not sure. That the eyes go away now that Instagram has become such a huge market and forum for the sets of eyes on it. I don't know. And even if it does go away, I firmly believe some of these great rookie cards I've got of people like LeBron, I firmly believe, even if it completely goes up in smoke in the next 2 to 4 years, that in 15 to 20 years, there'll be another craze, and then those incredibly scarce and then 30 or 35-year-old as opposed to 15-year-old cards will come back in. With stuff like crypto and NFTs and that, again, it's fear of the unknown, and it's fear of lack of knowledge, and just not wanting to go, even though you have no power or control over cards anyway. You've seen those comments coming in.
He's trying to pump and dump.
Jabarat is easily top 1,000 of all time.
He's probably not. I tell you what, he is in the top 430 in the NBA right now, because there's only about 30 NBA players or something.
Yeah, maybe Wayne could get into cryptocurrency.
Maybe he could. I'm interested to hear your. Would it be fair to say that things like, because I think when it comes to blockchain and crypto, you either have like a technical understanding of what's going on or you don't, right? Like I'm fortunate in the sense of, I'm no expert. I don't claim to be an expert in anything, but I certainly understand the technology and its potential use cases, implementate all that stuff. I have a good. I can look at blockchain projects, and I can have a pretty good sense as to whether, you know, it's a smart thing or not. But I'm certainly not. I have no experience with trading or anything like that. That's not my bag. So I can look at things technically. I'm not looking at the market and analyzing things, although I'm learning that as well. But as someone who doesn't have any kind of technical understanding of what's going on, as someone more who's, you know, very well educated, or pretty well educated compared to probably most people, own your own business, investing in collectibles. How do you see cryptocurrency? Like, what's your understanding of it? Would you put money into it? What have you heard about it? Like, where are you at on it? Just sort of in a general sense.
Where I'm at is, and I've learned this from some mistakes that you know, I've made investing in the past. So I would want someone like yourself, Matt, who was able to look at an asset and understand it from both a technical and a broader macroeconomic investing point of view. So to be able to go and understand within the options in, say, Bitcoin or crypto, or, you know, obviously Bitcoin's a type of crypto, but in that asset class, to go, this is the one, and this is, like you were telling me the other day, this ticket means this, this, and this. And it's not so much you endorsing it, but you saying, I'm going to go and do something like invest in one of these particular asset classes because you know, you think you understand and acknowledge it's a punt, but it's an educated punt to the extent that in the micro or the technical sense, you understand it and you think it's good. And in the macro, you think from a much broader world point of view that that particular class could gain attention. Because without either of them, without it being, you know, the best of that class, or without the macro position actually picking it up and sets of eyes coming on it and it taking off, and that takes a pretty, I guess that's what a good hedge fund manager is, right? Ultimately, they're looking at and taking bets. So myself, no, because I just don't understand it, and it kind of intimidates me, and I wouldn't know where to start.
Yes, it's really interesting you say that. So I think, again, none of this is financial advice or telling anyone to put their money in, right? But I believe, and I'm speaking from the technology standpoint, really, and all of my experience and things like that, I truly believe that blockchain, again, long term, I have a very maximalist view of it long term, but I think that's only possible by a minimalist approach and implementation in the short to medium term. I don't think we're going to get there by trying to flip the world on its head. I see cryptocurrency and what's happening in the markets specifically as maybe some people's greatest opportunity to get ahead in life. And what I mean by that is there is so much opportunity to make money in those spaces now, whether as a trader or more long-term as an investor. And I think due to things like the economic inequality that we have, like property is very, very difficult to access for most of us now. Not many things are paying a lot of money. For those who have a higher tolerance for risk and want to learn, we live in a time where it's never been easier to become educated on subjects. It is very, very easy to get a basic understanding of blockchain, of cryptocurrency, of what it is, what its potential is, how to start trading. So, for example, with my sisters, who are both young, who are, I think, 21 and 19 respectively, I've said to them, look, I strongly encourage you to educate yourself on cryptocurrency. I strongly encourage you to start dabbling in it. Even with 500 USD, start a very small portfolio. And for the next year, challenge yourself to learn the markets, how they work, learn about investing, teach yourself, educate yourself, because that could be the best possible way to earn a lot of money long term. I'm not saying it will be. I'm saying it's possible, right? I think it's a very wise thing to allocate a percentage of your time to learning about cryptocurrency or investing in general, learning about financial management, learning how to make disciplined decisions. The great thing about things like blockchain is because they're so early, the more time you invest into learning about them and getting experience with them now, you can have far more experience than most people on Earth in a far shorter amount of time, simply because it hasn't been around for a long time. The way that I started my entrepreneurial journey, I just went and taught myself social media marketing, various other related topics, 10 years ago, when no one was really using social media for marketing in New Zealand. It was a very strange thing. We had to convince people that social media, they should spend money marketing. Now it's just a given, right? And all I did was I just went and taught myself a domain as best I could, and then started working with other people, learning by doing. And all of this stuff, blockchain, crypto, it's so early. Just because we've had that, the people who have made all this money off Bitcoin or whatever, it's just beginning. It hasn't really even started in earnest yet compared to the macro of how we're going to look back at this time in history. So I strongly encourage people to, whether it is with cryptocurrency or investing or finance or whatever it is, this is the best possible time to learn, because you have access to learn as much as you want on demand anywhere in the world. I strongly encourage people not to dismiss blockchain and cryptocurrency as a fad. I think it's beyond that already, but it really hasn't begun. And so,
my mate Johnny Rickard, the owner of the storied Circus, I think you've met Johnny a few times, Matt, was telling me about how he had this mate called what was his name, Webby or someone like that. He reckoned that in the late 90s he was going on about this interweb thing and these emails, and Rickard reckons he was partying one night and said that said that this guy was going on and on, and he goes, "Oh mate, it's a load of horse shit. It's a fad. It'll pass." Interweb. I've never heard anything so ridiculous in this very charismatic, very funny way. And look what happened there. I mean, it's crazy to think in '97 when I was in the fifth form, working my way through quadratic equations very poorly and paying half attention to stories like about the Battle of Waterloo in history, that this thing was being built, which is completely it's the biggest technological innovation in hundreds of years, right? The internet. It has to be. It's crazy what it's done to the world.
So the same magnitude of impact that the internet had, the internet's about information. Blockchain's about trade. Blockchain certainly has the potential to have maybe not quite as great an impact because it requires the internet to work, but pretty close to the same level of impact on the earth. But blockchain has that much potential. A lot of people refer to it as Web 3.0 for various reasons, and it's not going anywhere. So again, I think the progress with it will be slow, but I would strongly encourage anyone watching is to not dismiss cryptocurrency, not dismiss blockchain as this sort of fad that's going to pass. I think we're far beyond that, but I think we're still early enough in it that if you invest time into educating yourself, that you will probably thank yourself in 10 years. I'm not saying you're going to make millions of dollars from it, but I'm saying that knowledge about this space will be very, very useful. And I'm encouraging businesses to think about that as well. Like, imagine for you, Shane, being a lawyer and the way that your business works now. Your business might work quite differently in a decentralized world. And so even just thinking through what does the impact of a more decentralized world mean for me, for my business, for the way I design my business, for my longer term strategies and plans, I think even an education or understanding of it helps with those types of things, because just as the internet displaced a lot of companies who were previously established, I think blockchain has the potential to do that as well. And it's the type of thing that's worth looking into. What I'm keen to speak to you about a little bit more, Shane, while we've got some time, is just I just want to hear your sentiment on some of the rookies in this year's class. of NBA. Have you watched Have you watched many games this year? Who are you excited
This
about?
this particular draft class.
Yeah, so LaMelo, or even just the last couple of draft classes. Who are you big on at the moment, aside from
Well,
Bol Bol, of course?
I'm big on Zion. I think everyone, I can't be bothered being so many people are hating on him and the weight and the fact that he's not as dynamic as he was in college and all that. But I've been watching him because I love watching Adams. It's so cool to have a Kiwi in the NBA. And I love watching the Pelicans. I love watching Zion. The stuff he can do is, yeah, okay, maybe he's not quite as fluid as he was a year ago, but just it's cool. I'm a newbie to basketball. He's super exciting to watch. It's really, really cool. He's like a big dump truck with this incredible dexterity and just he's really nimble on his feet. And I think I like Morant as well. I've got a really cool Morant card, so I'm rooting for him. But I think Zion's is awesome. And even if he does flounder or doesn't quite, it's a cool thing to watch evolve. And I think one of the other reasons he doesn't get the same why there are quite a lot of doubters, I think a lot of the, LeBrons and the, Kobe's, etc. They have this, and definitely Jordan, this visceral kind of really explicit win at all costs attitude. He doesn't have that. He seems like the quiet farm boy type. But I reckon there's an understated competitiveness, the way he grabs his, some of the loose balls and his own rebounds. I think there's a quiet determination there to just play a lot of ball and play it fucking well that actually will stand him in good stead for the future. So I don't know if all about basketball, by the way, but I just think he's a cool prospect. He's interesting to watch.
Have you explored other types of collectibles, or cards, not necessarily basketball? Have you started to look into
I've got a couple of Colin Kaepernick rookies because of the whole Black Lives Matter thing, and I think that could be culturally important in the long run. But no, I haven't. And the main reason is, again, fear of the unknown. It's just something basketball, something I collected as a kid. I like watching it, and I feel at least safe in the sense I know who is good and who isn't. Maddie, I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to wrap this up because I've got a 2:00 meeting about a shareholders agreement. We've been trying to get hold of these turkeys and pin them down for a while, and it's been challenging. So then after being the one who's been trying to shepherd everyone together to have this conversation, I can't then not turn up to my own meeting that I've called. So I hate to shut it down early, but we'll have to do a part 2, maybe devoted just to the NBA, maybe in a month or so.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Awesome. I really enjoyed that. Probably no one else did, but anyway, that's okay. It's all about self-gratification in this day and age, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's been awesome.
Thanks, mate. Really appreciate it. Cheers.
And good luck to James Ashwood.
He'll need it.
See ya.